And welcome to the series on signal processing tools. This series, first of all, we had an introduction video into this series, and I want to address the actual tools can be so varied. The first concept that we need to address is the concept of acoustics. You know that when it's a really varied application and science. It really is, and this wheel acoustics you can download on Docs Lab on Facebook, and take a look at it and all the varied applications of acoustics. You know, acoustics aren't just room acoustics, it's a science. And that understanding, there's a lot of different tools for a lot of different applications, and some of them can cross boundaries. You can have different applications and different pieces of software or hardware that have been created for one aspect of acoustics, the science, that may be very applicable to another area of acoustics. And this channel I started putting together to deal with audio engineering and signal processing from the point of view of dealing with audio and music. And so, I mean, we deal with a lot of the issues of acoustics, a lot of the concepts and the complexities, but we basically try to bring it back into the area that we're working with audio for music. Most of those concepts that we talk about can be applied to most areas of acoustics, but that's the area we're focusing on. So that's a simple concept that we need to address first of all. The second thing we need to address is when you go onto the internet and you just look up, acousticians tools, that it directly is going to room acoustics. Well, that's just one aspect of acoustics, the science. And, so it's not really addressing that issue, period. So the first thing that I want to do in this series is get it in your head that we're going to deal with the tools and the signal processing tools and acoustics one step at a time. We're going to deal with the DAW, the tools in the DAW. We're going to deal with VSTs. We're going to deal with standalone applications that can be dealt with that. We're going to deal with some hardware applications that work in conjunction with the DAWs and things like that. And we're going to try to take it one step at a time. So like I said, the series might get real long, but the applications can be, huge. Because even simple as you go on the internet and look up signal processing, the first thing that comes up is MATLAB. So, I have MATLAB, and, I've studied in MATLAB, and there's not a DAW here nowhere, bro. And so you have to understand that when you're trying to do signal processing in a DAW or some other standalone application working in music, there's a good chance that you're not pulling out MATLAB to work on it. And the understanding of it's a totally different level. It's like binary information of a program that you're going down into working at the very fundamentals of what's happening, and very mathematical. And you have to have some understanding of what's going on there to work with it. And it's not as as easy to work with as something like a DAW. And that's a very simple concept to get in your head. But we're going to look into that because most of the concepts are directly applied to things you're doing in the DAW. And the more you understand those tools and the functionality of those tools and the basic, fundamentals of those concepts, the better you're going to understand the other applications you're working with in the DAW and the tools in the DAW. And so that will be later in the series, but we are going to address that, but not at first. First of all, we are going to go into the DAW. We're going to go look at the DAW. We're going to look at all the tools in the DAW for signal processing and audio engineering pieces of audio, working with acoustics in the applications that we're addressing. And then we're going to go to any type of application like a VST, any type of application like that works inside of the DAW but is a separate application for signal processing and other tools for processing audio and doing acoustical work on pieces of audio. And we're going to look at those also. And we're probably also going to look at instruments, because sometimes that's not looked at as, a tool, but it really is. A synthesizer or something like that really can be a tool for working with pieces of audio. And if you go look at, the video I did on what was the last series that I did on getting a good full mix and adding other sounds in there and other waveforms and higher and lower frequencies, trying to sculpt the sound and trying to make it, and give it a fuller sound. That's just one example of how those can be an actual tool. like, a phaser or something. It really can be, looked at that way. So, and we talked about some of the things we're going to look at. So we're really going to address that first, that second, and then we're going to get into some other applications. We'll get into some very surgical tools. We'll get into some other experimental tools. We'll get into using things like MATLAB for being able to go, well, I know I can do that, but I can't do that here. How can I get that done there? And because that can be a huge concept for saving money, for getting things done in a much more simple way. The biggest concept to understand as we go through this series is to understand how I normally approach all of this stuff is that the simple concepts that build the larger complexities are more important. I mean, the better you understand just an EQ when you're doing spectral content shaping for your mix, the better you understand that and the simple concepts, the less you're going to go to other things that are more complex. I mean, I've seen VSTs and hardware and all kinds of things that are very complex. There are so many different things going on there when it's like you want to push that out of the way and go one step at a time. No, I want an EQ for that. I want this to do that. I want that tool to do that. I want that tool to do that. I want all mixed into one thing because I want that tool to do that one application it does well rather than 10 different things not so well. Does that make sense? And that's a really huge concept because I'll sit there and I'll go, well, you're using all that stuff and it's like, you don't really need that, bro, for what you're trying to do. You think you do, or and you can get lost in that. The DAWs and the different tools that are available in some DAWs that might be not in other DAW. And VSTs are a huge example. Applications that work inside of your DAW and your signal processing software. It's unbelievable, how many different ones there are, and the complexities that they've either tried to make out of simple concepts or have become twisted to the point to where you pull them out and I'm asking, what does that actually do? Well, what is that actually doing to the signal? And I sit down and pull out my spectrum analyzer and my oscilloscope and I throw it into MATLAB and analyze it inside of MATLAB and I'm going, what the hell is this thing doing? Because it doesn't look like it's doing what it's saying it's doing, bro, but I can hear what it's doing, but I want to know what it's doing because when I start spectral content shaping, it's just like anything happening to it is changing the waveform and is going to change the spectral content. I want to know the basic, things that are happening to the audio signal so that I can stack all those simple concepts and simple applications on, and to build larger complexities. And that's simple, just like building a symphony. And I try to keep it that simple so that, people don't get lost in it. And I had to go through that because I got lost down in every VST on the planet. And I finally looked around and I was like, bro, I don't, I don't need all that to do what I want to do. When we get through with that and we've addressed those issues fairly well, we're going to go into like MATLAB and we're going to talk about some signal processing concepts and the basic structures of that. We're not going to do that at first because it's going to be like super advanced music theory as far as working with signal processing. It's cool stuff to get into, but a lot of times you'll find some people, they won't get into it because they don't really need it for doing what they want to do. But the better you understand it, the better you're going to use the simple tools that you have. You've got your EQ and your DAW, but you don't really understand the signal processing concepts, the mathematical concepts that are happening, that you don't understand those things. The better you understand them and the basic simple concepts that are being applied with math to those tools to do what they're doing in the audio, the better you're going to use them because you'll think about that. You'll be like, well, no, because I know what that's doing. I know that's what that's doing to the signal. I'm not just listening to it. I'm understanding what's happening to it other than just listening to it also. And its application, where it can be applicable and why I would want to use it and where I'd want to use it. That way that when you pull out a tool, any tool that we talk about, whether it's a tool inside the DAW, a VST, another standalone application that you use in conjunction with your DAW, or another signal processing piece of software like MATLAB or something similar to that, or you have some other acoustician tools. There's tons of tools out there. I've got on there and was looking at these tools these guys were using when they were analyzing, animals, and I found some really cool ones from some universities that were under development, and they had nothing. It didn't have anything to do with what's the signal processing in a DAW. They were using it in a science application, in some totally other different area of acoustics. But it was things that were happening in signal processing, for analysis and signal processing and manipulating audio, used in science in different areas of acoustics. And that's hugely important because that kind of stuff can help you out a lot to get things done. And sometimes it's just simple functionality, and sometimes it's simple being able to understand and view something happening or something like that. And sometimes it's something that's really cool that makes you be able to create some other different thing with sound and or acoustics and spatialization, that's not really being used at this point yet because it's still a scientific application that hasn't worked its way through from the university into some kind of mainstream application for us to use in signal processing with music. And so those concepts are huge. So that's basically how we're going to approach this, and that might sound like a mouthful, but I think you'll find when we start that we're really going to start out with basics. We're going to start out with the DAW and the tools in the DAW. We're going to go to VSTs and applications that can work inside the DAW that are separate actual signal processing manipulation pieces of equipment, and then we're going to work from there, and we'll work our way up. And I do suggest you watch all the videos in the series, even if you don't own MATLAB, but I do suggest that you buy some pieces of software like that to really sit down and understand what's happening. The more you understand that stuff, the better that you're going to use the tools you have, and the more simplistic your workflow is going to become, and the better the work is going to be from the knowledge that you've acquired and accumulated from understanding all the basic concepts that build to larger complexities. So that's basically how this series is going to go. So get ready. We're going to start out and we're going to go. It's kind of backwards. Well, I ain't gonna say it's backwards because I don't want to go all the way into the basics of signal processing and start talking mathematical theory about what's happening. I don't want to go that far back right now. I want to go a little farther forward. I want to be able to deal with what's going on in the DAW. And if you've watched all the videos on this channel, you've got a pretty good understanding of sound manipulation, spectral content shaping, acoustics, audio engineering, and most of the concepts that we'll be dealing with and why and what they'd be used for and what's happening to the audio. So we're going to start there, and then we're just going to kind of work our way forward. And we're going to kind of work our way forward, and towards the end of the series, we're going to work our way back to more simple concepts and simple filtering and what all is actually happening there, so that by the time this series is done, not only do you understand those tools very well, but also hopefully you'll be able to understand a lot of the more simple concepts that can really build some serious complexities. And I'm going to try not to get it too mathematical so that we're sitting around trying to understand some type of filter, and that we have to sit there and figure out this mathematical formula. We're not going to try to go there too much. We're going to try to get it done as much in layman terms as possible. But I will give you direction to go there if you want that to. But if you can just get the concepts in your head, there's a lot of times working in the DAW and working with your VSTs and your applications inside the DAW and other standalone applications that you won't need to go too deep in that to really be able to use that equipment functionally for what you're trying to do in music. But the more you understand, the better you'll get at using them. So that's a real simple concept and very easy to understand. So peace, hope, love. That's the steps we're going to take in this series. And I hope you enjoy the series. And I'll see you in the next video when we start talking about the DAWs.